What's happening, guys? Happy Wednesday and welcome to the Dynasty WarZone, the People's Dynasty podcast. On today's show, I'm going to hit you with three of my 2022 season hot takes, and we're going to go over a little bit of news. Now, normally, this is the part of the show where I would introduce my co-host, the aforementioned man of the hour and the man with the power, but Jerry is traveling. He is checking out a new spot for him and his wife. So he's going to try to jump on a little bit later in the week for a bonus show, trying to link up. Right now, everybody's schedule is a little bit hectic. He's trying to relocate, and obviously we've got real jobs. So that's where Jerry is. Jerry will be back soon, but I wanted to make sure that we keep the streak alive. We're about a month away from 4 straight years of never missing a Wednesday here at the Dynasty WarZone, at least the podcast version. And I say that because that's how the show started. It was a podcast, but now we're on YouTube, and that's where I'm streaming live right now, live on Tuesday night. And that's the best way to get the show if you want to catch it live. Maybe you work second shift. Maybe you work third shift. Maybe you're on the way home and you love the Dynasty WarZone and you're stuck in 405 traffic on the LA freeways. I don't know, but YouTube is where we come to you live on Tuesdays. Last Wednesday, I used YouTube to give away our Scott Fishbowl 12 spot. That went to Mr. Lawrence LaFave. So congratulations to him. That video is up. I used the Wheel of Names. Thank you to everybody. We had a ton of people like that video, did everything I asked you to do. Unfortunately, we only had one spot to give away, and that went to Mr. LaFave, so congratulations to him. But be sure to head over to YouTube, especially in season. We do a lot more in-season content here at the Dynasty WarZone, but, redraft season right around the corner. Trying to get Dallas, he's the younger, hipper version of the Dynasty WarZone crew to do more YouTube, but he has a real job too. And he gets behind the mic to do a ton of awesome rookie content. And you can find that on Mondays, typically via podcast, everywhere where you get your podcast, Apple, iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Google, you name a podcast form, and we're usually out there on it. So be sure to check that out. I do not have a good people, bad tweets for you. We'll have one on the bonus show with Jerry on Thursday. This is something that I didn't have time. I do have one. It's not football related. If we don't find a good football related one, I will share the non-football related one. So I'm just going to jump right into this. But before I do, normally after good people, bad tweets, I mentioned the Patreon. Patreon.com/Dynasty WarZone. Had a bunch of new people jump in with us over the last week. We thank you so much. We know there's a lot of content creators out there putting out a lot of great premium content. Thank you so much for choosing us. Looking forward to getting in some leagues with you and doing battle. We just finished drafting Patron 14. That is a UEFA Champions League themed draft, and super interesting based on the brain power of our own Neil Gray. If you're looking for a good patron, a good premium behind-the-scenes content, good group chat, group to join, man, I tell you, you're going to do a lot worse than the $5 a month you'll spend over at patreon.com/Dynasty WarZone, and that helps support the show. It pays for the streaming service, equipment, things of that nature. So that's what we're doing with the Patreon. Please check it out when you get a second, patreon.com/Dynasty WarZone. So I will jump into this right now. I'm just going to cover some news without Jerry here to go back and forth. That's why we'll do a bonus show on Thursday. Jerry will be having his hot takes. We're going to use the month of June. So as I record this, it is the 7th. This week we're doing quarterbacks. Next week we'll do running backs. The following week, wide receivers. The week after that, we'll do tight ends. We're going to give you hot takes for all 4 positional groups for Dynasty and Fantasy Football. Could be seasonal, could be Dynasty. But without Jerry here, that wouldn't provide much of a show. So I have 3 QB hot takes for you here in just a minute. But I did want to share some news as we're wrapping up, I guess, voluntary mini camp. And in some cases, like Green Bay, mandatory minicamp has already started. So I will jump into some news and notes, picking up where we left off last week. The first one, I was listening to an interview with Albert Breer of Monday Morning Quarterback. At least I think that's where Albert Breer is from. But he was talking about that Deebo at one time was not willing to negotiate with the 49ers and that he wanted to get out of San Francisco in entirety. He just didn't want to be there. I think part of it was he's like an SEC. I think he's a South Carolina guy by nature. And I think that's where he wanted to be. I think that's where he would prefer to live, maybe on the East Coast, the South, like a Carolina or an Atlanta, Miami. I mean, some of those teams need wide receivers, some don't. But I think more of it was there were more factors than just San Francisco, the offense, etc. But anyway, Deebo is now willing to discuss a contract with the Niners. But that's not the part that I found interesting. The part that I found interesting was that Breer mentioned the drafting of third-round rookie running back Tyrion, I hope I pronounced that right, Tyrion Davis-Price. And that was one of the olive branches that the 49ers were using as a way of saying, hey, we're negotiating in good faith. We want you to be a wide receiver. We want you to be less involved in the running game. We have Elijah Mitchell. We have Trey Sermon. We still have Jeff Wilson Jr. on the roster. We drafted this guy in the third round, 93rd overall pick, and we're going to have you less involved in the rushing game going forward. And for me, as a dynasty gamer, that's the record scratch moment. That's the what? That's not good. So I did a quick peruse of Fantasy Pros ADP, and per their most recent Fantasy Dynasty startup ADP, Deebo is the wide receiver 5. He is their wide receiver 5 off of the board. And like literally, I read that and I was like, that can't be right. And then I read it again and it was. I was like, that doesn't feel like that would be where I would draft Deebo. Because to me, a large part of Deebo's value to be valued that high as the dynasty wide receiver 5 is tied to that rushing usage. Deebo, I've done this math before, but I did it again for the sake of this show. Deebo scored 339 fantasy points last year. 84 and a half of those were directly tied to rushing yardage and rushing touchdown. That is almost exactly 25% of Deebo's fantasy points. So if you take that away, and maybe you wouldn't take all of it away, but you're going to take a large part of that away. If you took all of those 84 and a half points away, that would drop him down to the wide receiver 12. It would put him just ahead of Mike Williams of the Los Angeles Chargers. That's horrifying. Again, this is equity. I've said this before on the show. This is the equity I'm looking to cash out in Deebo. I am looking that the minute that he re-signs or there's talk that he re-signs or he shows up at camp, and I can get anybody, and I mean anybody, to give me dynasty wide receiver 5 overall and a startup value for Deebo Samuel, he's gone. If I can go get a screenshot of Fantasy Pros and I can send that to a league mate and be like, here, look, this is not my opinion. This is the good folks of Fantasy Pros. He's their wide receiver 5 in a startup. If I can leverage that information to get out of Deebo, and it's not that I'm anti-Deebo, but we seem to forget that he's been injured. I think he hasn't forgot that he's been injured. I think he hasn't forgot that the wear and tear that playing running back took on his body. He did miss one game last year, played through some injuries, played great, had 1,400 receiving yards. But for me, this is about where I got Deebo a couple of years ago and where I see Deebo going forward. I tweeted this out the other day. It's like, it's called a career year for a reason. What are the odds? What are the percentages? What are the chances that Deebo will ever repeat the 2021 season? I don't think they're high. Is it possible? Yes. Is it probable? No. He himself has said, I don't want to run the ball as much. Okay, let's take him at his word. The San Francisco 49ers said, cool, Deebo, we hear you. We hear your words. We hear your pleas. We hear your cries. You don't want to run as much. Cool, we're going to draft another running back because we know this system eats running backs, as no running back has led the 49ers in rushing yards 2 years in a row with Kyle Shanahan as the head coach. So we hear you, Deebo. We understand the wear and tear this offense takes on our rushers. We're going to add more depth. We're going to take more away from you. I don't think your league mates are putting that 2 and 2 together, and I think you might be able to get out for someone that you really like. I don't think you're going to get CeeDee Lamb, but in my head, I'm like, if they're that close, I know CeeDee Lamb has had a dynasty resurgence in the last couple of weeks. I know some of the bigger services were touting, him back to being the wide receiver 3 overall in a startup, and I agree. I have CeeDee Lamb in my top 4 for sure. If I can get CeeDee Lamb and I got to add a little bit, if I got to do a throw in to move from from Deebo to CeeDee Lamb, I'm in 100%. This is a long-winded way of saying that I am 100% out on Deebo at his valuation. I think that was his unicorn season. I think that was his career year, at least from a fantasy perspective, and I'm looking to cash out. It's a great bit of equity between where you acquired him, either in 2021 startups or where you drafted him as a rookie a few years back. This is a great chance to take all that equity and move it into the future. So that's what I'm doing with Deebo, but I don't think that note from Albert Breer, a guy who's really patched in with NFL news, I didn't think that nugget was worth ignoring, and I think I want to give it to the DWZ listeners first. Next bit of news that I saw was old Mitch Trubisky, and you know what? I'm not normally one to drop names, but my old pal, my old buddy, the Dynasty Happy Hour's own Tyler Gunther tried to pull a little sneaky on your boy Memphis today. Busy day at work, wrapping up my busy season, and get a little trade offer for Mitch Trubisky. I won't tell you the trade in its entirety. I'll just tell you that I got one from the good Mr. Gunther. And 5 hours ago, as it would seem, Mitch Trubisky is the clear starter / QB1 per the local news beat in Pittsburgh. Now, this doesn't surprise me. This is actually Tyler being a very smart dynasty gamer. He's reaching out because he not only needs quarterback depth, this is a super flex league, but he also drafted Kenny Pickett. It's a pretty solid move. Now, I'm going to use this as a way to say that I still like Mitch Trubisky. If you have him as like your QB 3-4, he's going to be very startable some games. I don't think there's a drop-off between him and Big Ben last year. I think Big Ben finished as a QB2. If you play a lot of super flex, and we all do, especially if you have QBs like Kyler Murray, like Lamar Jackson, like Josh Allen, like guys that move around and run around quite a bit. A guy like Mitch Trubisky is a nice little stash on the back end of a roster, and I think you could do a lot worse than Mitch Trubisky. And if you already have Kenny Pickett, it's worth inquiring about Kenny Pickett. I'm going to talk more about Mitch Trubisky, Kenny Pickett, etc. later when I get into one of my hot takes. I'll tell you what I tried to do in a counter in this trade with Mr. Gunther. But that's another way of saying that I like Mitch Trubisky for this season. If you're doing redraft, superflex leagues, I think some of the underdog content is now superflex. I love Mitch Trubisky. He's going to win you some weeks. We often forget that really, I think there's more upside with Jalen Hurts, obviously. I think he's got QB1 overall on the season upside. But, man, Mitch Trubisky got some wheels and got good weapons. I don't think that they're quite Philadelphia good weapons, but those are good weapons in Pittsburgh. So I don't dislike it at all. Cheap Mitch Trubisky will not hurt you in 2022. Darrell Henderson. And if you're watching on YouTube, I apologize. I'm still fighting a little bit of a cough. But Darrell Henderson, stop me if you've heard this before. He's missing time with a soft tissue injury. Excuse me. So I am going to leave that in for the YouTube audience because I'm streaming live. But on the podcast side, I'll edit that out. All right, and stop me if you've heard this before, but Darrell Henderson is missing time with a soft tissue injury. For me, I know he's missing time himself with a broken foot. I got just an absolute ton of Kyron Williams late in my rookie drafts. He's the kind of guy that if you haven't done your rookie drafts, I'm looking to get. We know Cam Akers, he looked okay coming back from the Achilles injury in the playoffs last year. I don't trust Darrell Henderson as far as I can throw him as a backup running back. And I really think Kyron Williams, a guy that I really liked before the athletic measurables came out during combine season, I don't think this is going to raise his value any. He may even be on waiver wires if your league only did, 3 rounds of rookie picks. Again, I got a ton of him in the late 4th, early 5th. I love it. I absolutely love it. And I mean, he's really, really outplaying Darrell Henderson from being the backup in this offense. And then, he's a play away from being a play away, a guy that you could potentially use and flip down the road. But for a guy that's going that cheap in rookie drafts, even though he's got his own little injury issue, I just think that we'll be looking up kind of like Khalil Herbert last year in Chicago, even Elijah Mitchell. If we get midway through the season and all of a sudden both Darrell Henderson and Cam Akers have succumbed to injury and this guy's the lead back or at least operating in that satellite back Austin Eckler-ish type role for a really good offense in the Rams, I'm not going to be stunned. So give me all the cheap Kyron Williams based off of this news. I think you can still get him cheap, and I suggest you do. Another bit of news. Leonard Fournette, Lombardi Lenny, coming to camp, looking a little fluffy, pulling a Kelvin Benjamin from a couple of years back. If you know, you know. And my man looked like they were putting like a practical joke on him. Like they gave him like a large jersey when he really needed like a 2X. My man looked like he was wearing a saran wrap number 7. And that's not great. But let's be honest, Leonard Fournette has always played above 230. And I don't think weight will be an issue. He's still the back to own. If you're a contender, Leonard Fournette was a top 5 running back for you last year. He got hurt at the wrong time last year. He got hurt in the playoff stretch. But he's a guy that will continue to be the most trusted guy in that backfield for the Buccaneers. There's a little Giovanni Bernard and Keyshawn Vaughn, and I know Dynasty loves Rachaad White, but Tom Brady's Tom Brady. Tom Brady's the reason why Antonio kept getting work in New England, in Tampa Bay. Why? Brady loves his dudes. And it's clear Leonard Fournette's his dude. He's a good pass catcher. Is he going to pull like a Luka Doncic or a Shaq or another guy, Carmelo, and play his way into shape? Probably. He'll probably start playing himself into shape now that he's in OTAs and mandatory camp, and he'll let that springboard his cardio and conditioning program, and he'll work behind the scenes the rest of the month of June and July, and he'll show up ready to play football. He's a pro. He knows how to get his body ready. So don't let this bother you if you're a contender. But if you're a wannabe contender, maybe you finished in the top 4 in your league last year. You finished 1st through 4th, and you're looking for a veteran, and you can get a fellow league mate nervous about Leonard Fournette. Go out and get him. Go out and give the 205 for him. Go out and give the 208 for him. You may only get a year or 2, but that's fine. If you're trying to contend, that 205 and 208 are worth a lot less than the opportunity to win a championship. And I think Lenny Fournette's going to give you that. Now he is going to, I believe, year 6 of his pro career. So his years and days are numbered from a top 12 running back standpoint, but still a guy with Tom Brady in that offense. They're going to score points. They play in a soft division. I love Lombardi Lenny. And if this camp news gets you some cheap Lombardi Lenny and Dynasty, I would let that happen. Another story that came out was that Treylon Burks has asthma. And in my mind, I'm like, this feels very convenient. Very convenient that 2 weeks after he was having difficulty breathing, which, if you know anything about asthma and difficulty breathing tie right hand in hand. So that does make sense, but why now? Why now? Was he just diagnosed? It's totally possible. He could have been misdiagnosed or not diagnosed over the first 22 years of his life. And it took being with a professional operation like the Tennessee Titans to finally diagnose it. I don't know. I know this is a guy that has had weight issues going back to college. And unlike Lombardi Lenny, who I know knows how to play himself back into shape, he's done it many times. This is not the first offseason we've talked about Leonard Fournette's weight, but it's never something I want to deal with wide receivers. I mentioned Kelvin Benjamin. And no, I'm not calling Treylon Burks Kelvin Benjamin. I'm just saying all of this is just another reason why at cost, I'm just avoiding Treylon Burks. I would rather trade back in rookie drafts. I'd rather wind up with Chris Olave. He is someone I would rather have than Burks. And I just found it interesting, and I found it convenient that after him not being able to perform a couple of days at rookie camp, he all of a sudden has asthma. Well, good for him. There's these inhalers, so maybe that will help him play his way into shape. So that is a little bit of news, just some nuggets that I found interesting that I thought I would kind of put some whys and some hows behind it. Whether it's acquiring Mitch Trubisky as a cheap, QB3, or not letting the news about Lombardi Lenny and his weight bother you. The opportunity to go out and try to get more cheap Kyron Williams. It's one thing I've always prided myself on with what Jerry and I do here at the DWZ. We just don't tell you that player X is a good player and then let you figure it out on your own. We tell you how it fits into your roster, when you should be buying, how you can apply that and use this as actionable advice. I think too many podcasts in the Dynasty space want to go into just tell you players are good and bad. And I think that as a savvy football fan and someone who loves Dynasty, you can do that on your own. And I just want to make sure that we're being actionable here at the Dynasty WarZone. So I'm going to get you with 3 hot takes, and I'll get out of here. We'll try. Keyword try. We got to get schedules to line up. We got to record. We got to edit. We have a lot to do to make the Dynasty WarZone happen here each and every week, but Jerry and I will try to connect on Thursday for another show. And I bet you if you squish this one and that one together, it'll feel like a full-size Dynasty WarZone. But here are my Memphis's 3 QB hot takes going into this season. And these are hot. These are spicy. I think they're good. And I'm going to make them actionable for you as Dynasty gamers. So here we go. My first one, Mac Jones will severely regress coming off of his QB 18 overall season as a rookie, and he will finish outside the top 25 QBs in Dynasty. And we'll have a lot of Baker Mayfield, Jared Goff, Tua Tagovailoa questions about Mac going into next year this time. We'll be asking, much like we've asked about Tua, this is, I think you'll hear a lot of this is a make or break year for Mac Jones. And I like Mac Jones. Jerry likes Mac Jones. We were a Mac Jones shop. But I got a lot of concerns about Mac Jones and this team. I took the most notes on Mac Jones, so I will go ahead and jump into this. First of all, he was the QB 18 as a rookie, but that was with Josh McDaniels as his play caller. Josh McDaniels, whatever you think of him as a head coach, has in his career, more so than anybody else, gotten a lot out of QBs as a play caller. Tom Brady, and Tom Brady's the GOAT. I get that. But guys like Matt Castle, guys like Tim Tebow, guys like Mac Jones have had really good seasons under a guy like Josh McDaniel. And now it came out on Monday that Matt Patricia could be the new play caller on the offensive side of the ball. Now, for whatever you think about Matt Patricia, I know he's an Einstein-level genius, thermonuclear engineer, whatever. None of that shit matters to me. Can he call plays? Is he a good offensive head coach? Well, he's not. He's a defensive head coach. And how much of that was him when he was the defensive head coach? And how much of that was Bill Belichick operating through him, which allowed him to get the job in Detroit? I don't think he's a good coach. And if you want some evidence, he carries around a laminated play sheet with a pencil tucked behind his ear. Draw from that what you will. But back to Mac Jones. Mac Jones averaged 10.2 fantasy points per game in division. That is terrible. That is less than subpar. He did not do very well in division. And I know those that dig into those numbers will say, but Memphis, he only had like half a point in the game against Buffalo in that weird weather game on Monday night. And that's true, but there's still going to be weird weather games. He plays in the Northeast. He plays in New England. He will play New York. He will play Buffalo. The odds of him having a wonky weather game or two a year is going to be there. So I don't love his divisional point score. And I could argue that he has the worst weapons in the NFL. I mean, Devontae Parker, maybe a best ball flyer. I think some of us in dynasty circles like Jacoby Myers. I just took him in Patron 14 as part of that unique format. Kendrick Bourne, second-round pick Tyquan Thornton. N'Keal Harry might convert to a tight end, but they've already got Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith. I mean, stop me if I don't believe these guys are elite. I just think that maybe we saw the best of Mac Jones as a rookie. And a lot of times with these young guys, I think that's part of the reason for optimism around Tua this year. I'm not a Tua guy, and I'm more of a Mac Jones than a Tua guy. But if you had to tell me right now, Memphis, right now, pick one, Mac Jones or Tua. Before all of this, before Josh McDaniel went and become the head coach of the Raiders, and before the Matt Patricia news, I probably would have said Mac Jones. Now I feel like I would lean Tua. And we can talk about that for Dynasty or just the 2022 season. I just think Mac Jones has bust written all over him. He's not a plus athlete. Between his ears make him the best option. He's come in great shape. I just feel like in general, this is a horrible recipe for Mac Jones. So one of my 3 hot takes around QBs this year is that Mac Jones finishes outside the top 24 QBs, does not advance off of his rookie campaign, and will be given dynasty GMs in Superflex headaches this time next year. Now, do I think that will replace him? No, I don't. But I do think that he's going to be very tough in anything outside of a best ball to push the start button on a weekly basis. If he's more than your QB3 this year, I think you really got headaches, hassles, and horseshit as it relates to your QB2 in a Superflex. Now, normally I'd bounce this off Jerry, hear his thoughts. He'd share his, we'd bounce one, and we'll get Jerry's opinions on my hot takes on Thursday. But because he's got to give you hot takes. Jerry owes you, the listening audience, the consumer of the Dynasty Warzone, Jerry owes you 3 QB hot takes, and we will make sure that man pays what he owes. My second QB hot take is that Aaron Rodgers will retire at the end of the season after a very sub-Aaron Rodgers season, very reminiscent to what he did in 2019. I think he finished his QB 10-11 that year, if I remember correctly. And I think he just steps down. You know, he's almost 40. I think he's 38, 39. And you hear him talk a lot about retirement. If you watched the match last week, he talked a lot about retirement. You know, he's not going to have an elite weapon set there. That's why I like Aaron Jones, if he stays healthy, to catch 90 plus balls. I was talking with Cody Carpentier, former guest of the show, friend of the show, and great podcast, host and content creator in his own right. He and I were chatting on Twitter today. He said 80, and I was like, no, my brother, I think he's much closer to 90, and I think he'll get 120 targets. And I think that Aaron Rodgers will just look around at the end of the season. He'll be like, you know what? I've got 250 million in the bank. I want to continue to battle Matt Stafford and the Niners and Kyler Murray. And that's just the West, Forget about the Detroit Lions. I think Detroit is not a threat this year, but that's a team on the come. They're a quarterback away. The NFC South isn't that good, but you got some good teams in the NFC North. And I just think Rodgers will have to look back and say, you know what? I just don't know that I can do this anymore. And the biggest thing for me is the lack of weapons. I don't know how without Devontae Adams, he personally can be a top 5 QB. So if you're not an absolute contender, I'd be looking to move him. Same with Mac. I don't love Justin Fields. That's pretty apparent. I don't love Zach Wilson. But unless you really think that you've got a top 2 or 3 roster in Dynasty and a super flex, I mean, can I move Aaron Rodgers for Zach Wilson plus? I don't love Zach. Can I move him for Justin Fields straight up? I don't think you're getting Trey Lance. I don't want Kenny Pickett or anyone from this class. But can I get a guy? I wouldn't want Mac Jones. Could I add to Aaron Rodgers and get Trevor Lawrence? I mean, I want out of the Aaron Rodgers business. And I think his points per game regresses. I don't think you're going to see the same Aaron Rodgers, the MVP we've seen the last 2, given the state of this offense, the weapons around him. And I think it's time. I don't think you're going to get a Brady-esque run. I think he's going to end more around 39-40. And this all ties back into Packers GM Gutekunst. It's a great name, by the way. Gutekunst, talking about that Aaron Rodgers really doesn't have a 3-year deal. He has a series of 1-year deals. So for me, if you can get out of the Aaron Rodgers business and not take a significant loss, now is a great time to consider that. And my last hot take for the 2022 season is that Baker Mayfield finishes the season as a top 16 QB. That would be right around a career high for him. I think that Baker's Choose Your Own Adventure tour could go a lot of ways. There continues to be more damning information about Deshaun Watson. We now have added a 23rd and a 24th accuser. The comments, if you haven't heard them, I'm not going to repeat them, but if you heard the comments from his attorney, Rusty Hardin, last weekend on a different podcast, it feels like both Watson and his attorney are thumbing their nose at the NFL. And I can see the NFL laying down the hammer. And if that happens, if I'm the GM, if I'm Andrew Berry of the Browns, do I go to Baker and say, listen, we're not going to have Deshaun this year. You don't have a team. There's not a huge market for you. We have to pay you anyway. As the GM, as me playing Andrew Berry, I owe it to the other 52 guys in this locker room and this coaching staff that I owe it to them to get this team back to the playoffs. And I think you give us a better shot of doing that than Jacoby Brissett. So let's you come in, be a team guy, repair, rehab, and rehabilitate your image within the league, because that's why Baker doesn't have a job. I am not a Baker guy. If you've listened to this show for any length of time, I'm not a Baker guy. But, this would give Baker the opportunity to rehab his image. There's not 25, 30 quarterbacks in this world better at playing professional quarterback than him. He's the kind of guy next year that could be on the free agent market. Could Tennessee, I don't remember the dead cap number of Ryan Tannehill. Could they be looking to replace Tannehill? Did the Matt Ryan experiment in Indy bust? Did Carolina not find what they were looking for with a rookie QB in Sam Darnold? There are going to be jobs. Seattle, do they come calling? I just think Baker Mayfield, whether it's in Cleveland or another spot, is going to be a starter. And I'm going to wrap this podcast up with how I started it, talking about Mitch Trubisky. So I mentioned the offer with Tyler Gunther. Tyler has Baker on this roster, and I offered him Mitch Trubisky straight up for Baker Mayfield. And I offered that to another GM, exact same situation, because I have tons of Mitch Trubisky shares everywhere. And I offered it up to that GM for Baker Mayfield straight up. I'm going to go back. I've been declined. I'm going to go back. I'm going to add a little bit to Mitch, trying to get Baker. I think Baker is going to give you value in 2022. I don't think we see it now. I think we'll see it in a few weeks. And I think Baker's a steal. I think a steal in Dynasty. He'll never be what people told you he was. Going into his sophomore year, we had services out there proclaiming him the QB2 overall in a startup. And I called bullshit then, and I call bullshit now. But I'd also call bullshit if you told me that there were 25, 30 QBs better than Baker Mayfield. It's not even close to true. He should be a starter, and when he does, the good thing for Baker is that if he becomes a free agent, he will actually get to pick where he goes. And hopefully he doesn't pick with his ego. He picks with his mind and his agent and goes somewhere where he can really be featured as a like a QB2 type. I just feel like Baker's going to have another contract worth of dynasty value. So those are my 3 hot takes. Mac Jones outside the top 25 on the season, and his dynasty value will plummet. Aaron Rodgers retires after a very mediocre 2019-ish season. And Baker Mayfield finishes as a top 16 QB this year, borderline QB year for Mr. Mayfield, whether that's in Cleveland or somewhere else. So there you go. Wanted to get you a show, wanted to get you to work, through work, whatever you're doing, driving in a car, driving in a truck. We appreciate you. We appreciate you listening, watching, supporting the Dynasty Warzone. So whether you're a podcast, consumer, hit pause. You're almost at the end of the show. Go leave us a 5-star review somewhere, Spotify, iTunes, wherever. Say some nice words. It goes a long way. If you're watching on YouTube, like the video, comment on the video. That interaction helps with the algorithm and the driving of the show. If you want to help us with premium content, there's something in that for you. Opportunities to get one-on-one help with me, sometimes Jerry, great group chat, extra podcasts, chance to be in leagues for $5 a month. I think that's a smoking hot deal. So all those are ways to support the show, and the patrons, patreon.com/Dynasty Warzone. But I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to go see what's going on with my man Jerry, make sure he made it home safe. And we're going to try to link up on Thursday for a bonus show. But until then, you guys have a great week. I'll talk to you soon. And remember, here at the Dynasty Warzone, we're just trying to make the world a better place for fantasy football. Have a great Wednesday, guys. Talk to you soon.